Well, it's the first week of January, and you know what that means? That's right. We got to talk about the first obligatory horror film of the year. A lot of people will not consider this movie the first horror film of the year and will give the mantle to Wolfman. Understandable, but this is the first horror film that I see this year, so that's what I'm going with. The film stars Odessa Young as a 19th century widow who has to make an impossible choice when, during a cruel winter, a foreign ship sinks off the coast of her Iceland fishing village, and now a mysterious entity is picking off her crew members one by one. This movie is not going to be for everybody. This is a very slow moving folk tale that if you're into movies like The Witch, The Lighthouse, or this show called The Terror, I think this is going to be a movie for you. On its surface, I really like a majority of this movie. There was very little that I didn't like about this movie. For starters, the cast in here, I thought they were all great. The camaraderie between everybody in this group, you felt that family dynamic in here. They're not all family, but you do feel like they've been together for a really long time, and that is something that I really enjoyed about this movie, is the fact that you are able to get attached to some of these characters. I kind of wish I could get attached to some more than the others, but as far as character development, I really enjoyed the attachment that I got to these characters because you do buy their intensity, you do buy what they're going for and their expeditions. They always go out to fish so they can have food, and while they're on this little fishing trip, they come across a couple of shipwrecked people, and you see the dilemma. They don't want to help the shipwrecked people, and so when that kind of catches up to them, that is very interesting to me. I thought the way it was all set up was great, and I really enjoyed that aspect. This is a very slow moving film, so if you're somebody that isn't really big with just dialogue heavy horror films like The Witch, or even with something simple like Late Night with the Devil, I'm not sure how this movie is going to work for you. I think you are not going to love it as much as probably other people. This is a very artsy type of movie, and some of the people that I was in with were not the biggest fan of this movie. They thought it was boring, it was slow. So if you're just a general audience member going into this movie thinking that there's going to be jump scares aplenty, it just doesn't happen in the way you think it's going to happen, because they built up this mystery and suspense very well. It messes with your head in the way that the Smile movies kind of mess with your head. So the camera lingers on a couple of images, and it makes you kind of look at the image just to make sure you're seeing what the character is seeing. And Odessa Young, the only other film that I've seen that she was in was Assassination Nation, and I wasn't really the biggest fan of that movie, but I thought her performance in that film was great. I thought the performances in that film were all great, but this movie is kind of her showcase. She is leading this movie, and a lot of the traumatic events are weighed on her shoulder. And the way that they drive this character forward is a very interesting look, because we're all seeing everything that she is seeing. She's kind of going a little bit crazy also with everybody once they all gets picked off one by one. I thought she did a really good job of bringing the heavy emotional moments so that when she is scared and she starts seeing things, you can get on board with what she is trying to do. And like I said, this is a very slow moving film, so a lot of the jump scares in here are not going to be loud bangs. It's basically a long shot of the camera in the dark, and it makes you play with your head. It makes you see things that the character is seeing that you don't know if it's there or not. Sometimes it takes the shape of something else, and when you do get to see what the character is seeing, I wasn't the biggest fan of it because it relies too much on CGI. Not a lot, but it's really covered with a lot of the dark cinematography, and that's another thing that I really want to give a huge positive to, is the cinematography for this movie is absolutely beautiful. The Icelandic landscapes and everything look absolutely beautiful. The cabin that they are staying in is great, bringing you into that time period and getting you invested with these characters. I thought was done great. Some of the things that I'm a little bit mixed on are the jump scares, because it is a very suspenseful film, so it's not really relying on a lot of in your face jump scares. It's really small and contained. So, one moment a character could be looking at the corner of her room and then it quickly switches to a different scene. Sometimes those moments are able to breathe in here as long as they possibly can, but other times you kind of wish you had a little bit more to those moments. And I think that is something that I really enjoyed about this movie. I wasn't sure how I was going to enjoy it for the first half of this film, but once I got into it, then I was able to get on board. And these are the types of jump scares that I am a big fan of. I have grown out of the loud bang jump scares, so something simple like this where it's trying to play with your head, I thought worked. Some of the issues that I have with this movie is that, not for me personally, but for a majority of people that are the casual goers, the people that are not the biggest fan of art pieces. This is a very slow movie. A majority of this movie is just talking and getting you invested in these characters. And once things start to go awry, that is when a lot of the jump scares happen. They're not loud bang. So if you're somebody that really likes the loud bang jump scares, this movie is not going to work for you. It is a very slow moving film, and that's just going to bore the hell out of the casual viewers. And I felt like if you had set up the ending of this movie in the first two acts of this film, it would have played with your head a little bit more, and I kind of wish that happened, but it just felt out of nowhere. It didn't feel satisfying. It just felt like you needed a little bit more, and that was the biggest issue, because when the movie ends and it gives you the explanation, I just wanted to say, what the and that is the biggest bummer of this movie, because you are invested for a majority of this movie. If you are hooked, the ending will piss you off, but if you're somebody that is not on board with this movie, the ending is going to piss you off even more. But overall, this is a decent watch. As far as obligatory January horror films, this is the better one that we've had since Scream 5. I thought this was a decent watch. It's really enjoyable for the first two acts. I thought there was enough there for me to enjoy it and recommend it to a certain amount of people. But overall, it's a decent watch. It's in a very limited amount of theaters. So if this movie hits streaming or on VOD, check it out. I think you're going to have some fun. Just know this isn't your typical horror film. But those are my thoughts on The Damned. Have you guys heard of this movie? Have you guys seen the trailers? Go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you guys for the next video.